Hi, I'm Annie Oortman, and welcome to Captivate Your Readers and ensure they buy your next book. Let me get my screen sharing going, and we will get the party started. What do you say? Okay, here we go. Captivate your readers, ensure they buy your next book. Because I'm guessing you're all here because we want to make money at this, right? So to get started, let's toss up some realities of today's publishing world. Fact one, making money as an author is challenging, but not impossible. Fact two, most successful authors make the majority of their money through sales of their backlist. Fact three, the only thing that you have complete personal control of is the readability of each book you write. And fact four, improving the readability factor of your books requires determination, dedication, and discipline. So allow me to take a little bit of time just to expand a bit on these realities, because then I think you'll have a better appreciation and you'll see the value and hopefully respect the techniques and strategies I'm going to show you. So fact one, according to a recent article by The Guardian, the average earnings of professional authors fall below the minimum wage, which right now is about $16,000 per year. Not really a figure to instill confidence that you can make a living as an author. However, I can tell you from personal experience and industry knowledge that many fiction and nonfiction writers do make a decent living at this. So, fact two. Now, most authors don't start breaking even until after 5 or 6 books. A backlist provides passive income and exponentially increases the chances of reaching new readers. The more hooks in the water, the better. Successful authors know this and keep writing books to expand their backlists, as well as ensure they've got books coming out. Fact three, authors have close to no control of what will happen with their books once they're written. Indie authors have a bit more, but not much. However, all authors do have control of how good each book is. So successful authors recognize that they don't know where their next reader is going to come from. They have to make sure every book they put out is good. And fact four, keep in mind that nobody's first draft is ready for publication. Nobody's. First drafts are for getting your ideas down, for letting the words flow however they need to get the story out. After that, the really, really hard work of turning that first draft into a sellable novel begins. Readability is your goal now. So now you're probably saying, so what exactly is readability? And it's what I call the ease at which a reader can read, comprehend, and to me, this is the most important part, submit to your book. Readability is doing everything you can do within the power of being the author to ensure nothing. And we're talking things from nebulous words, poor sentence structure, feeble plot flow, insufficient character development, all those things that makes a book, anything that makes the reader stop, question, and or leave before he or she really wants to. To me, the key with readability and ensuring you captivate your reader is you don't want to give them a reason to put the book down. And you do want to give them a reason to buy your backlist and pre-order your next book. So how do you do that? By getting yourself some insurance. And yes, I know, I'm making it a real word. Readability insurance tip number one, ensure conflict is evident and sustainable. Conflict is the lifeblood of your manuscript. Without it, nothing happens except a lot of rationalization and angst. Sustainable conflict makes your plot and characters compelling and readable. So what is conflict? It's when your protagonist wants one thing, your antagonist another. The conflict is what keeps your story going and it reveals a lot about your characters. Conflict is the reason your character can't have what he or she wants. If your main characters could have what they wanted, then you really wouldn't have a book. So how do you build strong conflict? Well, you start by answering 3 simple questions. Your protagonist's goal, what must he or she have or be? Your protagonist's motivation, Why does he or she want that? And your protagonist's conflict. What blocks him or her from his goal? What's his skin in the game? Once you've done that for your protagonist, your main character that's going to change the most in the novel, then you're going to do the same thing for your antagonist. Okay, for an example, so you understand what I'm talking about, let's go ahead and go to my first romantic suspense novel called Till Death Us Do Part. And my protagonist is Vicki Golden, a 40-something mountain guide on Mount Shasta. Vicki's goal, or what must she have? She must save Mount Shasta without revealing her secret. Her motivation, which is why does she want that? Because Mount Shasta gave her stability when she rebuilt her life. And who's getting in the way of that? Who's stopping her from achieving her goal? An unknown developer is blocking her efforts because he won't give up on putting a geothermal project on Mount Shasta. Now, let's do the same questions for our antagonist, which is Christian Van Leer, a Dutch aristocrat and real estate developer. Christian's goal is that he must make this real estate project work to save his family's dying company. His motivation, why he's doing that, is because work is the only thing that gives life meaning after losing his wife to a horrible accident. And what's stopping him from achieving his goal? A secretive group of tree huggers are fighting hard and dirty to stop his real estate project. When developing your conflict, keep in mind that that conflict doesn't have to be a huge thing. However, it cannot be something that your protagonist and antagonist could easily fix with a simple conversation over a beer or a glass of wine. We're talking the plots where it's they're afraid to tell each other they care about each other, or it's just miscommunication. The problem with that is it doesn't last through the book. And that goes on to our next point of conflict, which is sustainable conflict. It's a struggle that has to last through the entire book. It's what keeps readers reading. If the conflict is not sustainable, it runs thin within the first third of the book, and your protagonist and antagonist spend the final two-thirds rationalizing to themselves and, in turn, your readers as to why they're not solving their challenge. Readers hate this kind of conflict. Like I said earlier, it gets thin, and then your characters do the whole, I'm afraid to tell him, oh, I should tell him, he's afraid to tell her, or if it's a miscommunication and you just have them kind of avoiding it, readers will throw the book against the wall. Sustainable conflict works best when what your protagonist wants is in direct opposition to what your antagonist wants, and neither are willing to walk away. Sustainable conflict develops when things happen in your story that continually raise the stakes for both your protagonist and your antagonist. And the other nice benefit of having sustainable conflict is if you have strong, sustainable conflict, the book practically writes itself, because as you raise the stakes for each character, you see the whole thing unfold. So how do you ensure your conflict is sustainable? Here's the conflict box, and I'm not sure if you've seen this before, but this is a great way to do it. So let's go back to Vicki and Christian, who we talked about their goals and conflicts, and I'll show you how to fill out this. Now, Vicki's goal is to save Mount Shasta without revealing her secret. Christian's goal is to make this real estate project work to save his family's dying company. So, what blocks Vicki's goal? An unknown developer is blocking her efforts because he won't give up on putting a geothermal project on Mount Shasta. And what blocks Christian's goal? A secretive group of tree huggers are fighting hard and dirty to stop his real estate project. Now, sustainable conflict works best when what your protagonist wants is in direct opposition to what your antagonist wants, and neither are willing to walk away. So if we were to draw a line from Vicki's goal to Christian's conflict, is Vicki trying to achieve her goal blocking Christian? Yes. Draw a line from Christian or your antagonist's goal to your personal conflict. If your antagonist is causing the protagonist's conflict, if Christian is causing Vicky's conflict by pursuing his goal, you have sustainable conflict. And you have created a reason for readers to buy your next book because they're going to love this one. Readability insurance tip number 2. Develop characters readers connect to. Adding complexity and intensity to your characters adds depth to your story. When you rely on surface layer of, say, a stereotype to say what you need, the approach does fall flat. And again, readers are going to throw the book against the nearest wall. A stereotype is a social accepted generalization about a specific collection of people that oversimplifies their qualities into predictable or cliched types. Think jocks, they're all stupid, right? Rednecks, they're all gun lovers, right? Think Germans, they're all Nazis. Stereotypes exist, and they're easy for an author to use because they're familiar and recognizable. But unfortunately, they're not interesting, no surprise, there's no mystery. Relying on stereotypes usually paints your main characters into a formulaic corner. And to get out, the author sometimes has to drop the stereotype without a believable and compelling reason because they need the story to move forward. And this really drives readers crazy. For example, I'm going to show you a book that I worked on recently where the original draft had Charlotte Darlington. She's vice president of a big old bank. And the stereotype was set up as a Republican control freak who likes her world clean and organized. She forgoes staying in a boutique hotel, where things are guaranteed to be clean and organized, to stay with an old college friend. Peace Finkelstein is a Democrat hippie that offers to share his home and 15 rescued dogs, cats, and birds with Charlotte while she's in town on business. So setting her up as a control freak where she likes her world clean and organized didn't make sense that when she's in town for business, she's going to stay with her hippie friend. So instead of giving a really good, compelling reason to make somebody go out of their comfort zone, it made her read from the beginning that not a very interesting character. So we went back and did some change around, did some reasons to make her get out of it, and it made for a much more compelling book that sold to Harlequin later. So how can you develop characters your readers can connect to? Well, the easiest thing is to work with archetypes, which is an original pattern or model for a type. Think Wanderer, which is Lee Child's Jack Reacher. Think Seductress, Margaret Mitchell's Scarlett O'Hara. Think Free Spirit, Jane Austen's Emma. An archetype uses the type of person as a starting place for a memorable character. And there's several great books on the market that delves into archetypes and that can help you start building your character. So once you have that and you have the basis for their existence in your story, it's time to add the bells and whistles that round your character out. For example, physical description. And this helps you develop how a character appears to your readers, as well as his attractions and interactions. Personality type. Sprinkle spice and flavor onto your character with interesting traits and mindsets that make your reader care about him. Strengths and weaknesses. Ensure your story arc has somewhere to go that's semi-realistic, believable, and endearing. Goal, motivation, and conflict. And this is what adds fuel to your story's fire. You know, remember we did the conflict box just a little bit earlier? You're going to work that over and over again with your characters. And the thing is, you're going to dig deep. Don't settle for the first or second answer that comes to mind. Dig deep. And sometimes goals will change as you figure out conflicts. Just keep working it. Backstory tells your reader where a character is from, how they have lived, where they've lived, what they've seen, what makes their thoughts and actions easier to believe. The key thing with backstory is when you end up in your final draft, most of this will not be in there unless it really deals specifically with your story. But it's nice to have so that you know your character. And then what I really like are the little things like the tics, the expressions, rituals, things that, you know, are quirky, that makes your character appear human and gives him a unique voice and personality. So let me show you how we could build a character with some of these. And let's use a character that most people know from the movies and or books. For example, Lee Child's Jack Reacher. He's quite memorable, very compelling character. So let's take a closer look using his role in One Shot, which was the first Jack Reacher film. Okay, we're using the archetype of a wanderer who walks outside of the mainstream of society, stands apart, cannot attach to anyone but fights for injustice, gives everything to what he believes in, guards his heart carefully, often judges people's motivations with astounding accuracy. So we've used our archetype to give us a base, and now we're going to round him out. For example, his physical description: he's blonde, 6'5", 250 pounds, 50-inch chest, stocky and imitating, wears cheap jeans and t-shirts, wears them for about 3 or 4 days, and then replaces everything, usually by going to a thrift store. His personality type: he's an ex-military cop that doesn't quite fit into the civilian world. He wanders America, seeing things he's never had time to see before. He's trying to stay out of trouble, and but unfortunately, once a year, he finds it. He's a loner. He's the errant knight, the mysterious stranger, the kind of character really has shown up in stories forever. He's one of my favorite all-time characters. Strengths and weaknesses: Reacher's not just a thug. He's also a thinker, an intellectual. He's capable of quoting Nietzsche or coming up with the etymology of vagrant. He's a hippie and a rootless, roaming around America, seeking out injustice and righting wrongs. And he shows little remorse for the numerous felonies he perpetrates and has a primal sense of justice. A little trouble there. Goal, motivation, and conflict. In this particular book, Reacher's goal is that he must prove that the guy he thinks is guilty isn't. His motivation is that although all the evidence in the case points to the guy's guilt, his former MP cop radar says the man isn't. And his conflict is he knows the guy was guilty of murder once. Could the guy be guilty again? His backstory is he grew up on military bases. He's a West Point graduate. He's an ex-Army MP. He speaks English and French fluently. His mother, who he loved very much, once said to him, "You've got the strength of 2 normal boys. What are you going to do with it?" When he failed to reply, she answered for him, "You're going to do the right thing." And the things that make him interesting is he has an internal clock where his body automatically wakes up at the time he set when he went to sleep. He has a fascination with numbers. He has extremely acute deduction skills. He's a skilled marksman. His few indulgences are casual sex and coffee, which he drinks constantly. So all that makes for one extremely interesting character. Readability insurance tip number 3, show, don't tell. And I know this adage strikes fear in many a writer's heart, but I promise turning telling in your first draft into showing in your next draft is easy. And I truly mean it. It is easy. All it takes is a willingness to look critically at your prose and perform a bit of rewriting, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Telling is when the author is telling the story, not the characters. And the problem with that is it doesn't engage a reader's emotions. They hear the author's voice, not the characters. Showing engages the reader by putting him or her right into the story with the character, because it's the character showing the feelings, showing their thinking. And this creates empathy. So the reader's experiencing the same emotions as a character does. So how to turn telling into showing. And this is a question I get all the time. And really, in my opinion, it's very easy, and I'm going to give you a checklist for it. So just follow along. First, you're going to go rewrite all the filters that you have, because filters sift a character's action through thought rather than activity. These are the things we usually start sentences with, or sometimes in the middle. He saw, she heard, Joe noticed, Harry felt. Perfect for first draft, but when we go back to tweak it, here's when we need to really work hard and dig deep. He noticed there were 3 men running down the road, away from the fire. Let's take out that filter. Here's another one. The policeman looked like he didn't believe me. The policeman didn't believe me. The sound told Sandy she was not alone in the basement. And I love this one because this one, the writer not only got rid of that filter, but also dug a little deep and really came up with something to really pull the reader in. Sandy's breath caught. The rustling noise behind her repeated, "I'm not alone." All right, then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to rewrite all your expletives, because it's a vague, weak way to start a sentence. I want you to think of things like it is, it was, there were, there has been. Again, it's okay for your first draft, but now I want you to dig deeper. There were 3 men running down the road away from the fire. 3 men ran down the road away from the fire. All we did was take there were away. It was pretty evident that the policeman didn't believe me. Simple rewrite. The policeman didn't believe me. There was a noise behind her. Sandy was not alone in the basement. Sandy's breath caught. The rustling noise behind her repeated, "I'm not alone." All right. Next, you're going to eliminate 75% of your dialogue tags. Again, people have lots of opinions on this. I'm going to share mine. I think too many dialogue tags stop storytelling flow, because it really is telling at its worst. You're having to identify your speakers. Well-written dialogue needs only an occasional reminder who is speaking. Here's, "Hi, Joan," Helen said, her grocery cart coming to rest by a row of fresh produce. "Hi yourself," Joan said, turning to see her old friend. "What do you plan to do this weekend?" Helen asked, forcing a smile. "Tom and I are going out on the boat Saturday," Joan responded in a strained voice. "Oh, well, if you're interested, Brad and I are having a cookout Saturday night about 7, Helen said with a shrug. "We'll see," Joan laughed nervously. "Thanks." No movement, nothing interesting, just 2 talking heads and a lot of telling. It's really not good dialogue. It tells what they're thinking and saying. Let's see if we got rid of the dialogue tags and try to make it sound like a real conversation and keep the scene moving. "Hi, Joan." A grocery cart bumped into the display of red peppers. Joan turned to see an old friend her husband didn't care for. "Hi yourself." Joan picked up a veggie at her feet and returned it to the nearby display. "Have any plans for the weekend?" "Tom and I are taking the boat out Saturday." "Oh, sure," a shrug. "Well, Brad and I are having friends for a cookout Saturday night about 7, if you're interested." "We'll see." Joan moved away. "Thanks. Don't look back." That's compelling. That is showing. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do to get rid of your telling and add more showing is you're going to eliminate most, if not all, of the passive voice in your manuscript. Passive voice tells the action, which weakens the conflict that you work so hard to put together. Constructions like broken by, had been eaten by, was explained to, those kind of things are the most common form of telling. Brady was tormented by memories of the accident. Not a bad sentence, but by putting the emphasis at the beginning of the sentence, you're losing the meaning of what the sentence is trying to get across. I think it's better to move it around. Excuse me, the first one had the emphasis at the end. We're going to move to the beginning. Memories of the accident tormented Brady. Now, passive voice isn't grammatically wrong. It's just a weak way to write. The crevasse was being skied over by men desperate to avoid the avalanche. Again, perfectly good for your first draft as you're getting the idea down, but then you're going to come back and you're going to make it sound better. Desperate to avoid the avalanche, the men skied over the crevasse. And one more. A wonderful time was had by everyone attending Lady Hastings' Christmas ball. Everyone at Lady Hastings' Christmas ball had a wonderful time. That's much, much better. Okay, and then one more thing you're going to do that's going to help you get rid of the telling and do more showing is I want you to resist the urge to explain. This is something that angers many, many readers. It's saying something, then adding a summary or explanation of what just happened. Not only is it repetitive, but it's insulting to the reader. It leaves them, and sometimes they don't even realize why they're angry, but it's usually because you've now left them with the impression that you don't think they're smart enough to get what you have happening in the scene unless you tell them. And here are a couple examples. Jenny laughed so hard she was afraid she'd pulled a stomach muscle. Bart had just told the funniest joke she'd ever heard. Not bad, but it could be so much better. Jenny laughed so hard she pulled a stomach muscle. Bart, what a comedian. Introspection is a great way to do a much better job of showing rather than telling. Miranda was told that her husband had been seen with a neighbor lady several times. Again, more telling than showing. So, by going in, digging a little deep, we could really make this passage sing. Miranda needed a minute to absorb the truth. Her husband spent a lot of time with the slut down the street. A lot. Setting her coffee on the table, she headed for the tool shed. I'll kill the bastard. Ooh, now we know just how angry Miranda is. And that's a book I want to read. All right, one more for kicks and giggles. Despite what you think, Susie said defensively, I have nothing against y'all. Annoyed by the fact Susie clearly didn't get it, Lavelle stopped and turned to face her boss. I know you probably think that, she said. Maybe you think you're not racist, but if being black means I'm less fit to be a supervisor than you, then I'd say yes, you're holding something against me, my skin color. Susie was bewildered by Lavelle's accusation. She stood in stunned silence as she watched her subordinate leave. This would be a great passage in your first draft to remind yourself when you come back of what you want to have happen. So, you know, it's a good way to write it so that you know that feeling that you want, and now you're going to make it better. Despite what you may think, Susie said, I have nothing against y'all. Lavelle stopped and turned to peer at her boss. I know you probably believe that. Pivoting on a heel, she headed down the hallway. Bless your heart, Miss Smith. Bless your heart. There, less words, but a little more focused on what is happening, what's the energy in the scene, makes it a much more compelling read. Okay. Readability, insurance. Well, let me give you a shot here of all of them. So these are what you're going to do for your show, don't tell. Okay? All right. Insurance tip number 4. Share minimal backstory early. Not too early and not too much. You don't want to tell a reader everything about a character on page 1 or 2, or 3 even. You want to save that for later in the story. Dropping the information in too early creates information dumps that frustrate readers. And it often happens is then readers don't care about your character, the past, and you give them so much information they cannot remember it all. First scenes and first chapters are really for action in the present, for moving the story forward, for getting your reader into the story. So I want you to nix the tendency to spend half of that first chapter explaining everything in the past that leads up to this life-changing moment. And if you can avoid doing a prologue that includes that character, to me, I think that's a cop-out. And again, people have opinions on that. Mine is that's a real cop-out. I would like to see you weave that information in later in the story. So let me give you an example so you see what I mean. Corey grabbed her backpack that Omar Ray gave her last Christmas and headed out to school. She was a studious young girl and never left home without her backpack. Good grades were important to her. Omar used to help her study when they lived in Boston. They used to spend hours working on math, Corey's most challenging subject. Corey missed Boston. She especially missed Omar Ray. She remembered when her dad told her they were moving. Corey, we're moving, her dad said. What? Corey blinked in shock. No, Dad, I won't go. Way too much information, way too soon. And taking the scene backwards, taking your story backwards, right at the beginning of it, is one of the worst things you can do. So let's see if this passage could be reworked where you just need the information to know a little bit about Corey, a little bit of her situation, and a little bit about how she feels. Corey grabbed her backpack and a waffle and headed out the door. Enough studying for the stinking math test, time for school. Halfway down the street, rain threatened. Again, no umbrella. She never needed one in Boston, but since the move to Seattle last month, the skies constantly dripped. If Omar Ray were here, she'd have told Corey to put on a raincoat and boots, but she isn't. Just me and Dad. Just me and Dad in this stupid other side of the country town. So there, we know Corey's unhappy. We know she's not thrilled about going to school. We know that they moved, and we know that she misses her Omar Ray. That's what's important. That's what you need to do. Let's do one more for kicks and giggles. Oh, yeah, there it is. Carl rifled through his wallet looking for the dry cleaning ticket. He frowned at the $10 bill there, wondering how he had become $10 richer than he should have been. The cashier at the deli where he had just had lunch must have made a mistake in his change. Carl had been talking on his cell and hadn't paid any attention to the bills she handed him. He had just stuffed them into his wallet. The poor girl would come up short at the end of the day. It wouldn't be honest to keep the money. He checked his watch and retraced his steps quickly. Wow, that's a lot of information and a lot of telling. If that was at the beginning of the book, I'd be throwing it against the wall right now. Again, perfect for your first draft. You have the information, you have an idea of what you want Carl to do and how you want him to feel. So now let's dig deep, tweak it a bit, and come up with something like this. Where is the damn thing? Carl rifled through his wallet as he waited in line. No dry cleaning ticket, but a $10 bill had appeared out of thin air. Wait! The deli cashier must have messed up the change at lunch. Busy talking with his boss on his cell, Carl hadn't paid attention. He pressed his lips together. The poor girl would be short at the end of the day. I can't let that happen. Checking his watch, he turned on a heel and headed out the door to retrace his steps. Doesn't it sound a little bit better? It sounds exactly like what you had talked about in your first draft, that first passage, and now you dug deep and made it a really readable passage. Readability insurance tip number 5. Weave essential backstory throughout. Speaking of backstory, when do you share it and include all the details that matter to your character, to your setting, to your story? There's no perfect formula, there's no perfect answer, but the more you work at it, the better you get. Keep in mind, details add distinguishing features regarding your characters, but they must be relevant, dynamic, and the most important part, interwoven with your action. You want readers to have a clear picture, but you wanted them to see these details relative to what's happening. You know, starting a book out with a big long description, you know, he looks in the mirror and you go in this long description, that's not what you want. You want your reader to get these details without realizing they're getting these details. And another key thing is you want to avoid minutia. Don't describe every tiny detail that exists in the setting or how a character looks, what he or she is wearing, unless it's important to your story. And what you do describe should be woven carefully into several lines, paragraphs, and pages of prose. Decide what and who is important. Decide what's the purpose of the scene. What do you need to show the reader? Who do you need to show? I'm going to show you a couple examples. Tony clipped the leash onto General's harness and led him out to the ski lift loading area. At the load here point, they both stopped, and General turned to race the chair coming up from behind. When it was close, Tony said, "Load up," and General jumped on the moving chair and quickly turned around to lay down next to Tony. Now, instead of helping the reader picture the setting in action, this passage kind of bogs them down with a lot of detail and a lot of movement. Considering most people understand how a chairlift works, I don't know that you need to explain it. And the process of how General gets into the chair, I don't think is an important detail. So we're going to rewrite this for a little bit better readability. Tony nodded and then clipped the leash into General's harness before walking to the loading point. Load up. A chair swung around and they both hopped onto the seat. Turning around, the retriever settled down, nuzzling his nose on Tony's thigh. That's all you needed, because the idea of this part in the scene was to let them know that they're getting on to the chairlift and you're trying to show how tight the two of them are. I'd like to point out that just like the ski lift thing, anything that everybody does, starting a car, going into a room, at the grocery store, whatever, you don't need to give all those details because most of us would understand that. You just need to give us enough to know that's what's happening and then move on. Okay, let's do one more example. This is going to show you how only the necessary details are necessary. So this is somebody wrote down, thought they needed all this information. Lydia liked her newly redecorated living room. It had a large cream-colored overstuffed couch and a pair of club chairs upholstered in a plush taupe corduroy fabric. Matching ottomans offered a welcoming place for feet or magazines. Shades of olive and brown were used in the pillows that filled every piece of furniture. Pale gold accents over the mantel drew the eye to an antique mirror. Wow, that's a lot. I'm going to give you a test to see if you remember it. Here's the key thing. Not 90% of that isn't important to the main characters. To rewrite it, now we're going to show you how you can use those details, get enough out to allow your reader to paint the picture, but put it with relative to what's going on in the story. Didia stood inside the newly decorated living room, hands touching her lips, almost like praying. Maybe she was. The wreck of a house she inherited from Aunt Lurleen now shone like a gem. Didia spun, breathing in the scent of fresh paint. The gleaming antique mirror over the mantel was beautiful. Better enjoy this while you can. Didia flinched at her cousin's deep, grumpy voice before turning around. Jed loomed in the arched doorway. Anger and caution both rose in her throat. How'd you get in? She narrowed her eyes. You left the door open. Dropping into one of the taupe corduroy club chairs she just moved into place, he then kicked a leg up onto one of the new ottomans. Gee, why don't you just make yourself at home? I did not, Jed. Didia swallowed fear and stepped toward him. This was settled in court last month. The beach house is mine. Get out before I call the police. Now, this opening scene has purpose and conflict. Didia has purpose for being there and having worked on those decorations. A little telling in her thoughts reveals her emotions, and a little backstory says a lot about the reader. The action is clarified, the scene moves. Readability insurance tip number 7, give your narrative rhythm. In music, rhythm is the alternating recurrence of similar elements to produce a beautiful, compelling melody that listeners want to hear over and over again. In writing, rhythm is the alternating recurrence of similar elements to produce a beautiful, compelling story that keeps readers turning pages. Fluid, rhythmic sentences do 3 things. They emphasize important elements, they repeat phrases, clauses, or words, and show ideas to create lively descriptions on narration. So let me give us something to work with. Harry ordered his favorite meal at the taco stand. He grabbed the bag of food and took it home. He ate the tacos. Again, not a bad first draft effort. Let's take a closer look at what is possible. The kid at the taco stand passed Harry the sack of food at the drive-through window. Midnight, and he was the only customer around. Once home, the Tex-Mex aroma stirred an appetite he had ignored the last 15 hours. Busy day. Investigating 2 murders and a home invasion, no time to eat. Flopping the tacos on a plate, he savored every bite of beef and bean and cheese and dreamed about a hot shower and catching some Z's. 3 tacos in, the cell phone on his belt vibrated. Busy day. So, how can you make sure the narrative has rhythm? Let's take a look at that example. First, you're going to toss all the stuff that's not necessary. We're going to unify the sentences with transitions. We're going to give the readers something to care about. Then, sometimes it's nice to repeat a key word or phrase. Busy day was said twice. That adds a nice musical note, and is set off with punctuation. That means something important interrupted his day. That reminds us that he's had a long, serious one. He's interrupted, which means it must be important. So it's a little bit of a foreshadowing. Next, if you notice, we played with sentence lengths, we played with fragments and sentence variety. Sentences at the beginning of the scene are longer, and it's kind of given some subtext to the character's day being slowed down. So the character has 2. We're in Harry's POV, which is keeping the reader involved, and that makes the reader now have an emotional attachment. You're hoping to make the reader feel as famished as Harry is. He's a cop, but we didn't come out and say that. We hinted it. We can see that from his POV when he talks about, referring to investigating crimes. This gives sympathy to the reader because he realizes Harry's hard work and he can relate to that. Then when the phone rings, he realizes day's not done, and almost every reader can relate to that. They're now interested in Harry. And then you noticed as we moved further into it, after the phone call, and his day's going to get busy again, we use very short sentences. Transitions are another way to add rhythm to your narrative and help keep your reader understanding how things are fitting in. Let's take a look at one of these. Excuse me. Grady was sure he'd seen the suspect duck behind a BMW double parked next to an old truck. No way was the jerk getting away. Grady dodged several street barriers and delivery trucks to come up behind the man. The guy was gone. A bullet whizzed into the metal garbage can next to him. Grady ran for the safety of a doorway, searching the rooftops for the shooter. He stumbled into a pothole, twisting his ankle. Great, some detective I am. Thank God his partner wasn't here to see Grady trip over his 2 left feet. This isn't bad and has a lot of the things, or doesn't have a lot of the things we talked about, but my difficulty with it is there's no transitions to help keep the reader moving through it. It just kind of sounds da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. See how it reads a little bit differently when we add some transitions. At first, Grady was sure he'd seen the suspect duck behind a BMW double parked next to an old truck. No way was the jerk getting away. But by the time Grady dodged several street banners and delivery trucks to come up behind the man, the guy was gone. A bullet whizzed into the metal garbage can next to him. Grady ran for the safety of a doorway, searching the rooftops for the shooter. That's when he stumbled into a pothole, twisting his ankle. Great, some detective I am. He was certainly glad his partner wasn't here to see Grady trip over his 2 feet. Again. That's a much better passage if you ask me. Gee, I wish we could discuss several more readability tips. I've got quite a few more, but it looks like we've run out of time. So once again, I'm Annie Oortman from Annie Edits. If you have any questions regarding what I started today, would like to hear more about my readability enhancement tips, or simply would like a copy of the handouts that accompany this presentation, please visit my website at www.annieedits.com or just drop me an email at annie@annieedits.com. I'd like to give a big thank you to the Alliance of Independent Authors for the opportunity to share my thoughts with fellow authors. And I want to thank you for giving me your time today. Right on. I hope you guys have a great time, and thank you for sharing this with me. I appreciate it.